McDSP APB system, an honest audio gear review. Now, as all my reviews, this is me being very honest about the McDSP and kind of telling you what's good, what's bad, and talking about the McDSP system and what I love about it, what I don't love about it, and being very honest about it. And I love the McDSPs. They are phenomenal. I've got 6 units. I've got 5 APB 16s and I've got 1 APB 8. Now, that totals 88 channels of analog processing. Now, first of all, don't let the words McDSP, standing for digital signal processing, confuse you. APB stands for Analogue Processing Box. It is analog, but what happens is you have a plugin in your DAW that then controls the box. So you have all the analog circuits, but the plugins are controlling it. So there's no real plugins. The only one that is technically a plugin is the Royal Q, which is the EQ, but it still runs through the box and it still adds the mojo in that box. So it is still an analog EQ. It's just the EQ aspect of it is done in the box digitally. Now, the APBs, what I love about them, one thing, the most beneficial thing about having an APB is the fact that it is the gift that keeps on giving. Like, since buying mine, I bought it with, you get all the plugins, which is brilliant. So you don't have to fork out additional money for buying all the different modules. Let's call them modules, so they're not technically plugins. You get a wide selection when you buy it, and then new ones come out all the time. So I've put requests in. I've got requests for a channel strip, because the reason being, I basically said to Colin, look, I'm buying 88 processors. I've got 88 channels here. What I want is a channel strip. So I've got the option to have 88 channel strips, and using that with the S4, I technically give myself an analog console, in the sense of, without any of this other gear, I've got myself 88 channel console. So that's something that's coming. Don't know when that's coming, but that's something that is coming. Now, this is the good thing about the McDSPs, is that it's the gift that keeps on giving, in the sense that you might come into work one day and it's like, there's a new module, and it's like, brilliant, I've got myself a new piece of analog equipment in many cases. So like I've come in and it's like, I've got an email, oh, brilliant, there's a new tape module. Now I've got tape, 88 channels of tape if I want it. So this is the really good thing about it, and that's what I love about it. And there's a wide range. It's very compressor heavy. So if you want lots of compressors, I think there's probably about 6 or 7 compressors. Then you've got the Bob, which is the bass optimize bias. That's incredible. That just gives you a lovely low end weight. You've got saturation in the KD1, you've got the EQ, you've got limiters, you've got tape. There's all sorts. There's everything there's not everything you could want. There's no reverbs or anything like that. But you've got a lot of processing options all in one box. And this is, look, they're not cheap. This is one of the bad points, is they're not cheap. But when you break it down, I mean, you're talking about £7,000 for an APB 16, which to some people is like, well, that's a lot of money. And even to me, that I looked at that and I went, blood, that is a lot of money. My complete system, I think something like 40,000 for the APBs, which is a massive investment into one system that relies very much on the connectivity to a computer as well. So it was a huge investment, and it was a huge amount of faith that I put into McDSP, in the fact that, right, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be continuing to develop plugins and modules for this system, and it's not going to be a brick in 10 years. And hopefully that will be the case, that it will be still going. I mean, Colin's 25 years in with McDSP and says to me, you know, we're not going anywhere. So it's really, really good as these processing boxes that kind of do everything. Now, one way to look at it is it's almost like a UAD satellite, but an analog version in many ways. The other things I love about it is there's zero latency. Well, not zero latency, but there's latency compensation for what comes out the box, comes back in the box. The latency compensation, I believe, is done within the plugin. So much like when you've got you put a plugin on the any of your channels, there's your DAW is doing compensating for the latency. So that's one thing that's really good. So you don't get any latency, everything lines up, whatever, you know, inside your door, everything's lining up correctly. That's really good. So it's not like you're routing all these channels out and you're getting some latency. There's technically no latency because it's being compensated for, which is really good. You can stack 5 units, so you could buy 16, then add another 16, another 16. You can stack 5 units. What I do is I stack 3 units off of one Thunderbolt port. And this is the other good thing, is this is one thing I really love about it, is the fact that if I had 88 channels of processing, I would need 88 channels of ADDA conversion. The box has the ADDA conversion inside it. So you're utilizing the conversion that's inside the box. So you haven't got to utilize multiple interfaces and have a cascade of, like, you know, 80 channels and use up all these analog IOs. So you run straight down a Thunderbolt port and then back again. It's brilliant. It really is an incredible idea. All fully digitally recallable as well. Now that's brilliant. Everything about it is really good, and I wouldn't have spent the amount of money that I spent on it if I didn't think it was incredible. And the thing with it is every module does sound really good. Now, if you broke down how much things cost, I mean, you're looking at an APB 16 costing £7,000. Now that's 16 channels. So, you know, 16 channels. I mean, what is 7,000 divided by 16? If we just do that quickly, I mean, you're talking probably £430 per channel, let's say, for argument's sake. Per channel's £430. Is that right? Yeah, that's about right. 400. Let's say it is £430 per channel. That's really good value for money. And people say that £7,000 is a lot of money, and believe me, it is. But people say £7,000 is a lot of money, but what you're getting for that money is you're getting a lot. You're getting 16 channels of analog processing. If we say that it's £430 per per channel, that's, you know, that's really good value for money. And bear in mind that it's not just, if you bought, the closest thing you could compare to it is, let's say, 500 series. So let's say you paid £500 for an Alicia EQ. Technically they're about £800. Let's say they were £800, and then you got, that was a stereo unit, and you had a stereo APB, and that's costing roughly around £800 as well. The difference there is, sound quality wise, they're very, very similar. You know, they're different flavors, obviously, but what you get with the McDSP that you don't with something like an Elysium module or any 500 series module is that module is that module. It doesn't change. That's the only thing it can do. Whereas the McDSP, it can be an EQ, it can be a compressor, it can be tape, it can be a limiter. There's so much that it offers you, all in this one box, and that's what I think's brilliant about it. And that's one of the major pluses for this. If we talk about now what I'm not massively impressed with on it, there's very few things. There's some modules that I'm not hugely a fan of. I'm not a fan of the KD1. I feel there's a little bit of phasing involved in that, and I'm just not generally a huge fan of that. I'm not a fan of using the McDSP in mastering. It can be used in mastering. I'm just not a fan of it. Now, one thing I would say, and I made this mistake, was I had my McDSP module off a long Thunderbolt cable, and every now and then I'd get let's say once every 30 minutes or so, I'd get buffer limit reached, whatever, and it would do like a little pop, and then it would start back up again. And it was annoying because you had to monitor when you were recording that it didn't do it at that point. And that was annoying. And I quickly realized that it wasn't the McDSP that was doing this. It wasn't a problem with the McDSP. I put it down to the fact that I had so many McDSPs all kind of running, which is why I split them into threes. So I had 3 APB16s, 2 APB16s, and APB8. I put it down to that, but it still persisted. It turns out it was actually down to the cable that I was using. Because it was a long cable, I presume that's what the issue was. So I switched the cable. I actually put, might not be able to see them there, but I've now put them under there. And the reason for that is I've put them there so that I can use a very short cable. And by using this very short cable, I now don't get any of that buffer issues. I don't get any clicks and all this sort of stuff. So if you've ever had a problem, and you've got a McDSP and you get these little clicks, and I have heard people mention this, use a short cable. Put them close to your computer and use a cable that's maybe that long. If you're using really long cables, you may get that issue. That's certainly why I got that issue. Now, that's really the only issues I have had with the McDSP. And that's being honest. I really haven't had that many issues. There's a few plugins I'm not huge fans of, but you know, you're gonna favor certain plugins over other plugins. Like the plugins that I love, Bob is brilliant. The bass optimize bias, that's incredible. Tape is incredible. Very subtle, but makes a big difference accumulatively across every channel. The chicken head compressors, I love that. The Varimu comp is really good, and the Royal Q is very good. I don't use the limiter a lot, mainly because I've got analog limiters that I'll prefer to use, and I don't technically like to use the McDSP APB in mastering. But that's not the thing with that is that's not to say you couldn't. You could. There's certainly enough headroom. There's enough ability to use those in mastering. I don't use it in mastering because I already have all the tools around me that I need. I don't need additional tools to put into the mastering chain. The other thing with regards to what you could call a negative in regards to mastering is because it's over a because you're routing out over Thunderbolt and you're not using analog IO, you can't position in the chain exactly where you want that piece of processing. You either have it at the start of the mastering chain or at the end of the mastering chain. You can't have it in between. Otherwise, you'd have to come back in the box, process with the McDSP, then come back out the box. The other problem with mastering, and this is why I don't use it in mastering, is it's all the additional ADDA conversion. I don't like to add more stages than I have to in mastering, unless I have to, you know, the only stage of conversion I want to do is I literally want to hit the converters, come out the box, run through the analog mastering chain, and then back in through the converters. I don't want to then come back in through the converters and then go, oh, well, I'm going to put a McDSP limiter on. I'm going to have another stage of conversion going backwards and forwards from the McDSP, or I'm going to put one before and I'm going to come backwards and forwards through another set of conversions, because then what you've done is you've done 6 stages of conversion, whereas originally you could have just done 2. So I'm not a fan of using the McDSPs in mastering, but like I say, There's no reason you can't. So all in all, look, I absolutely love the McDSP APBs. They're incredible. They work incredibly well. They're not going to be for everyone. They're certainly for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made such a huge investment into getting those. Now, one thing I will say actually is when you look around me, I've got lots and lots and lots of gear. It's all pretty much, majority of it is digitally recallable. So I have a very digitally recallable mixing, all my mixing chains, very, very, very digitally recall. Everything's digitally recallable when I'm mixing. And that's a massive criteria for me. Now, the thing with the McDSP is I use all of the gear you see around me. They're my primary chains. This is how I feel about the McDSP. These are all my primary chains. And the McDSP is very much my secondary chains. I put all these chains on, and then what the McDSP does is it fills in the gaps all the way around it. So let's say, for instance, kick, snare, all the different drum bus, that one, and then all of these different channels and buses all get their own kind of West Audio unit applied to them. You know, the Better Makers, the West Audio over here, the Crambled Audio, the Tegler, where is that? Tegler down there. All these units are my primary units. And then what I do with the McDSP is the McDSP does all my tape simulation, and then it does all any of my EQs on channels that aren't my kind of main source material of the mix, which is just the way I like to work. And the reason for that is because of the equipment that I have. That's not to say that you couldn't get two McDSPs and have 32 channels and then be like, right, they are my primary EQs and compressors. And like I say, Colin is bringing out at some point a channel strip, and when that comes out, it's going to be amazing for people, because if you bought 32 two APB 16s, you've got 32 channels 32 channels of channel strips. And if you're working in the box and then just adding, you know, 16 stereo instances across a mix, or you could use a summing mixer that's inside the McDSP, the possibilities are endless with this. And look, the thing with it is like I said at the start of the video, it's the gift that keeps on giving, because the reason being is there's more modules coming out. They're not coming out thick and fast. It's not like you're seeing one every month. No, you're seeing one every 6 months, which is cool. You know, that is a new piece of analog equipment every 6 months that you're getting for free, which I love. So yeah, all in all, if I'm 100% honest, I'd give McDSP APB 16s my highest mark that I could give them, like 10 out of 10. They are incredible. There's very little to complain about, in my opinion. So yeah, really good. Highly recommend.